What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Today, special guest, Ben Badler from Baseball America. As you can tell by the books behind him, one of the smartest guys in the baseball industry. Ben, we appreciate your time.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I definitely know how to read. It's clearly implied by all the books back there, so I appreciate that.
Well, I shared with you, I'm a fan of your stuff. You're one of my favorite people to follow, especially when it comes to international free agency, when it comes to prospect lists. And so I'm excited to kind of dive into some of that and chat all sorts of stuff, international free agency. But let's start with the farm system. You were talking to me right before we came on that the Dodgers, from an organizational perspective, are kind of a fun one to talk about just because they have had such success at scouting players, developing players, that kind of thing. I'm curious, just as a big picture question, what is it, if you could put your finger on something, what is it that makes the Dodgers so good? Like, we know they spend money at the major league level, but they also draft better than everybody else. They seem to scout internationally as good as everybody else. They develop better than anybody else. Is there one of those things that you kind of would say is the secret sauce?
I think there's probably 29 other teams that are asking the same question, trying to emulate what the Dodgers are doing. I mean, they definitely put a lot of resources and capital into investing into scouting and player development, into the technology, into the people, into just this, the size of their
Yeah.
staff, both in player development and scouting. And I think they just hire really smart people to run those departments and hire a lot of really smart people throughout the departments too, both in player development and scouting. I mean, certainly like internationally, just a lot of really sharp people have come through there in recent years, like Ismail Cruz since they hired him. Um, now he's still there, obviously. I think he's one of the smartest and most veteran international scouts in the game. But like Brian Parker used to work for them. He's now the international director for the Angels. Um, Roman Barinas used to work for them in international scouting. Now he's the international director for the Twins. So like, I get, it's a problem when people are kind of going in and poaching all your
Yeah.
people, but it's a good problem to have. People are recognizing the success that you've had. So, um, yeah, it's just kind of an organization that seems to be firing on all cylinders in terms of player development and scouting, both domestically and internationally.
In your world, like whether it's a prospect or international free agency, like when the Dodgers are all in on a guy, does it sometimes cause you to rethink if you have that player ranked maybe lower, and all of a sudden you know that the Dodgers are all in, or they're giving a big check to a player? Like, have they reached the level where it causes some of even the smartest people in this world to second guess themselves?
Yeah, definitely like intrigued, not just with them, other organizations too, and it kind of depends on the department. But like when you see them trading for like a Nick Frasso, for example, it's like okay, like we like him too. Like I wonder what the traits are that they are intrigued by
Yeah.
with him, especially in that kind of a trade where it's like, all right, there's got to be something here, and it looks like they were probably onto something there.
Yeah.
He's only elevated his stock since then, but yeah, I mean, when a team consistently is doing well, I'd probably say the same thing about their international department. Like they're hitting on a lot of guys, not batting 1,000 by any means. Nobody does when you're signing players at 16 years old, but
Yeah.
the track record so far, or at least in recent years, has been pretty good. So, yeah, I think when you see an organization that has excelled in a certain area, when they do sign players or draft certain players, you kind of give them the benefit of the doubt, but you also don't want to like lean too far in that direction if you do have a lot of other reports
Yeah.
from other people who are also pretty sharp across the game that maybe are
Right.
not seeing the eye to eye with
Yeah.
them.
Well, one of the pieces that you guys have out, we're recording this on Wednesday. Your top 30 list is now live for the Dodgers. Before I get into some specific names, I'd love to get your thoughts on what big picture the Dodgers as an organization. They've gone through kind of
Mhm.
waves over the last 5 to 10 years of being position player heavy to being pitcher heavy to being right-handed pitcher heavy. Like today, as you sit here and maybe you're looking at the top 30, or as that's getting put together, are there any big picture observations that you have about the organization, the farm system, the state of it today.
Yeah, I think it's not quite as strong at the very top as it typically is. Now, it feels like it's strange to say that just because it's almost like grading the Dodgers on a
Yeah.
curve, like where they typically are, which like all right, so like the Royals, for example, are just a really bad team right now, and they haven't picked 1-1 multiple years like the Orioles did, but they're typically picking at the top of the draft. They're getting extra bonus pool money, extra
Yeah.
draft picks every year. They're getting extra bonus pool money internationally as well. They should have one of the best farm systems in baseball.
Right.
Uh, the opposite, whereas the Dodgers are consistently, picking at the back of the draft, even losing draft picks or losing draft positioning and losing bonus pool money because
Yeah.
they're signing free agents, qualifying offer guys that are knocking down where they're picking in the draft, reducing their international bonus pool money too, sometimes because of that. And yet they're still like a top 10 farm system
Yeah.
in baseball. They've graduated some of these guys who, had they still been prospects, obviously, and who they still control for several more years and are still really good players. So that's part of it too. But I do think the overall, like, there's not like top 50 guys or certainly not a top 25 overall prospect in
Yeah.
baseball in the system right now. They have some guys deeper down who could break out and become those players, but that's the one area where, in recent years they've had those guys, and again, like, they have them maybe still just on the major league team, but
Yeah.
they don't have it in the farm system right now. But the depth is what's impressive to me. Where I think I like a lot of organizations or fans of an organization, or I would include us at Baseball America. Like, if you write up like a specific organization, um, you tend to think you have, or that organization has, more depth maybe than they really do. But that's more just because if I write up the Brewers farm system, I know the number 19 prospect or the number 27 prospect, or number theoretical 38 prospect in that farm system just better because I know that system inside and out. Whereas you don't really know the same
Yeah.
level of depth and detail for comparably ranked players in the Marlins or the Braves or the Dodgers system, right? Um, but the Braves, or excuse me, the Dodgers do have very legitimate depth of players where it's like, sometimes we get to, we rank a top 30 and, we get to like 24, 25, and you're like, we could probably cut it here. With the Dodgers, you get to third and you're like, no, like, I still like a lot of these guys, and there's still some pretty good guys even beyond this range. Like, there are, everybody weighs, upside, risk, proximity, guys who are further away differently. There's some guys who are deep down in like the lower levels who maybe aren't top 10 prospects right now, who I think have a chance to break out and be potential top 100 guys
Wow.
one day. So I think the depth of the system, which again speaks to the quality of, both scouting and player development throughout the organization, for to be able to have that kind of depth, and for
Yeah.
given where they're picking in the draft, given their international bonus pool relative to other clubs, they should be closer to where the Royals farm system really is, but they're actually continuing to be one of the best farm systems in the game.
Yeah, we're spoiled. Only 4 top 100 prospects this year. It's like, come on, we're used to there's supposed to be 7 or 8, but at the same time, you know, not to compare all these lists, but what's fascinating me this year about the Dodgers is it feels like there's 4 to 5 Dodgers on all the different top 100 lists, but Dalton Rushing's on all of these lists. But like after Dalton Rushing, it feels like there's like 8 or 9 different guys who are represented on different top 100 lists, which I think, to your point, speaks to a, which we'll get into in a second, different sites value, like how close are you versus what's your ceiling and that kind of stuff. But it's fascinating to me to see names down in the, Jackson Ferris, he comes over and it's like, oh, he was the number this prospect in the Cubs system. And then you start talking to people who do Dodgers lists. It's like, well, where's he going to rank? And some people are like, I mean, he might be 12, but it's just because of the depth that organizations have. So let me get into a couple of these names. Four names in the top 100. I want to ask you about two in particular. Nick Frasso's the only pitcher in the top 100, the Baseball America top 100 for the Dodgers. Is he your favorite arm among Dodgers in the Dodgers system? Would you say?
Um, yeah, probably like him, Gavin Stone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is Gavin Stone's in the top 100 too? Right? I'm sorry, I messed that up.
Yeah, I mean, look, like, yeah, they're pretty close. And then like you said too, not just different sites value players differently. Like we, as you know, we have a pretty wide staff here at BA, so like we're always disagreeing internally about like
Fair.
where a player should be. But yeah, I mean, Frasto has a lot of really intriguing traits with him. Um, like the fastball especially is
Yeah.
pretty electric. It's elite velocity. It's up to touching the upper 90s. There's deception. It the just the life on the pitch seems to help that play up. It's a really hard slider too. There's feel for a changeup. Um, you know the medical stuff is still a red flag in terms of having the durability, but I think he's in a great organization for that in terms of like, I'm not sure what role he'll ultimately end up playing, whether it's like a multi-inning relief threat or a starter where the Dodgers seem to now especially have
Yeah.
the
He'll be
depth.
in a 7-man rotation by the time Frasso's ready to pitch at the major league level.
Yeah, so like he's in a good spot for him to deliver some kind of value in a I think a pretty impactful way for them.
Yeah, and I messed that up because Stone is still in the top 100, and I meant to ask about that as well because Gavin Stone, like outside of Bobby Miller, was the top pitching prospect in the Dodger organization a year ago. And while Emmett Sheehan kind of burst onto the scene, Stone was the first guy that got a chance to stick in the rotation at the major league level. He was higher ranked than Emmett Sheehan was, and again, Sheehan was in Double A, so there's a lot of layers to that. It's not to say everybody assumed Stone would be better, but you guys still have him in the top 100. It seems like some folks saw the major league thing and tons of red flags, and they're out. So where are you? I mean, and to your point, you may not have had him in your personal top 100, but he ends up in the list. So where are you at personally on Gavin Stone, knowing how much he struggled at the major league level last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a lot of guys come up and have some initial struggles early on. Um, and it was what, like 31
Yeah,
innings, something
small
like
sample
that. So
size.
yeah, it wouldn't be, the last guy. And sometimes it takes like, more than a year for guys to get
Yeah,
fully acclimated and make all the adjustments that they need to make to stick around at the big league level and really have success there. So, um, it's the fastball is there. Certainly the changeup is there
yeah,
for him. It's probably his best pitch. Like we saw though, obviously there's still adjustments he needs to make. Like, do I think he's a front end starter? No, but like I think he has a chance to be like a solid like number three, number four. Yeah, like I think that's certainly a plausible outcome for him if everything clicks.
yeah. One other guy that I wanted to ask you in the top 100 was Andy Pajes. He's an interesting guy because he's been on the prospect radar, but last year gets wiped out by a shoulder injury, and so it felt like that was the year that we were going to kind of find out, like, is he ready? Does he maybe make his debut, or is he sort of trajectory to 2024 and then shoulder surgery, which is never a good sign on its own, but then it kind of wipes out this year of development. So do you think, like, is 2024, end of 20 back half of 2024, is that a reasonable ETA, do you think, or because of the shoulder surgery, do you think we're still a year away?
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's tough, like you said, with the surgery. We'll see how he comes back when he's healthy. I mean, a ton of tools. Obviously,
Yeah.
the arm strength, the power. It's the pure hitting ability. I'm more skeptical of that type of profile. So I think he's somebody who probably might end up needing like a full year in AAA. I could be wrong, but I think he's not somebody where and I mean, geez, like even I would have thought Michael Bush would have been,
Yeah,
for example, I was like in the big leagues already, but
fair.
it's hard to say exactly like when he'll be able to like crack that roster. But yeah, given the injury, just given some of the holes that I think he still has with his swing and with his approach, it might be a slower cook to get there for him.
Fair. Okay. Before we move on to international stuff, you guys, Baseball America had 4 players on kind of guys to watch for the 2025 list. We got Josue De Paula, Joendry Vargas, Jackson Ferris, and Theron Lorenzo. Um, Take this where, like, I don't know if there's 1 or 2 teams on that list that jump out to you that you're kind of high on. But talk to me about any of those names that jump out.
Yeah, I think DePaula, I mean, right now is a borderline top 100
Yeah.
prospect. I think if you put him in there now, like not only would I not argue, I might even agree. Like he's super impressive for, especially offensively. Just a really nice, pretty left-handed swing. Feel for hitting. There's power. He's 6'3", more room to fill out. I think that you're going to see even bigger power once he gets into his physical prime. I mean, shoot, he's still 18 years old. He
Yeah.
just had a really good season in the Cal League and low A. I have really high expectations for him, especially offensively. Defensively, there's definitely some more limitations with him. It's going to be corner, outfield, ordinary defender at best with improvements. So that's something where he's got to um, make some strides, but it's not uncommon to see that for a young, 18-year-old corner outfielder who's, really good at hitting and is probably mostly just focused on hitting his
Yeah.
entire life. So, but yeah, I mean, that the hitting is there, and I think the power is there too. I think there's a chance to be a middle of the order uh, type bat. So I'm a huge fan of him. I think he could have a big, I don't know if breakout year is the right word because maybe he's already had that
Yeah.
in 2023, but him, and then yeah, you mentioned I think Yoendry Vargas, another guy who I think once he comes to the States this year is going to get a lot more attention because he was big international signing for them out of the Dominican Republic, uh, like a little more than 365 days ago now.
Yeah.
Just had a huge year in the DSL. Hit. I mean, I expected him to have a good year. He really had a great year, both in terms of hitting and hitting for power. Um, Certainly more defensive value than DePaula, whether shortstop maybe ends up third base more likely, but given his size, not that not that it's a given necessarily, but
Yeah.
I think a lot of things to like with him. I think he's somebody who could really explode if he comes over and has a big year in Arizona this summer.
And then Lorenzo, just real quick, do you have him ahead of Diego Cartaya on the Dodgers sort of prospect rankings, your own personal kind of list?
Ooh, it's a lot closer than I would have thought coming into the year because I mean, going back to when Diego signed, it was like, who like at least along like the traditional July 2nd prospects for that year was like him versus Marco Luciano with the Giants, like who should be number one among that group, like 1A, 1B almost. So and then he was really good early on in his career. And then man,
Tough one.
2023 was just a rough year all around. I would not have expected him to struggle the way he did. This is going to be a huge year for him, just to be able to rebound and recoup his prospect status. Whereas, um, Lorenzo has been, like the overachiever, just
Yeah.
achieving beyond what my expectations for him would have been. I think there's still some holes in terms of the swing or yeah, I mean the swing itself is not bad, but it's there's some still swing and miss in there. He does walk, he does hit for a lot of power, and I do think he'll be able to stick behind the plate. Certainly, plenty of arm strength for it. So um, I could see like if you're still a big believer in Diego Cartaya, having him above Lorenzo, but yeah, I mean, at this point, given the struggles that Cartaya had last year and just how good Lorenzo was last year, I might be inclined to have Lorenzo ahead. But I think you could argue it either way if you really believe that Cartaya is going to have a bounce back year this year.
It's hilarious to look at the state of catcher as a position major league wide, and then to realize that the Dodgers drafted and developed Will Smith, who's one of the top three catchers in Major League Baseball and who's not that old himself. And then, here we are arguing about who's the second or third best catcher in the Dodgers system, both of whom guys that could be top 100 prospects. We didn't even mention Dalton Rushing, who's the catcher that actually is the highest ranked prospect. It's
Oh
a
yeah, that
position
guy.
of, and
Yeah.
and you think about Keibert Ruiz, who was in this system. I mean, like the catching depth
Hmm.
that the Dodgers have produced is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah, it's impressive. Yeah, like you said, it's not a lot of organizations are producing like that.
No. One last prospect question. My favorite to ask folks like you: is there a guy, I would say, quote, off the radar a little bit? Maybe that's outside the top 20, maybe that's outside the top 30, however you want to define that. But is there a name or two that personally, as you're putting your list together, you're like, man, if I could just go on gut instinct here, this guy would be higher. But you're looking at, hey, 12 months from now, this guy could be somebody that's plus 15, plus 20 spots on the list.
Yeah, I think Eduardo Quintero, who they signed out of Venezuela last year, was not, got like it was like 290 he signed for, which is, solid bonus, but not,
Yeah.
not Yoendry Vargas money. Went out, had a phenomenal year in the Dominican Summer League. They signed him. He was in Venezuela. He was. I don't write up many players whose position I list as catcher slash center fielder,
Yeah.
which really speaks to the unusual athleticism and tool set that he has. And I think even like the Dodgers were split. Like, should we develop this guy as a catcher? Like, he is so athletic and we think he can catch and he has a strong arm. But if we do that, all right, it's probably going to slow his development time down just because so many demands defensively and just
Yeah.
physically to catch. Or do we just send him out in center field because he is like at least a plus runner? And if we put him in center field, he'll he looks really good out there. He'll better retain his speed out there, and it maybe frees him up a little bit more offensively, just with less to focus on from the defensive side. And everything looks great so far. He had a phenomenal year in the DSL. Can hit, can run, good instincts for the game, good athlete. Just checks a lot of boxes that you look for in a young player. I think he's somebody who kind of like Vargas too. Once he comes over to states, more people see him. If he has gets off to a good start in Arizona, he's gonna be a lot more chatter on him in 2024. I think.
I love it. I love it. Let's shift to international free agency real quick. Just a couple questions here. Emil Morales, the Dodgers top guy, the only top, 25, 50 player that the Dodgers go out and sign. I've seen the rankings on him. To your point, these are 16 and 17-year-olds. So expecting there to be consensus. There are some people that have him as a top three guy in this class. There are other people that have him closer to 15. Give me your breakdown of Emil Morales and what the Dodgers are getting there.
Yeah, I saw him play in a tournament last year down in the Dominican Republic, and a lot of really positive reviews on him, especially offensively. Somebody who's hit well in games, swing works well, consistently hits the ball in the air, um, and he's a big dude. He's probably like 6'2", 6'3", still growing into his body, but broad shoulders. I think he's going to be somebody who has a chance to hit and hit for power too. Um, I think and again, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier is like, yeah, like the Dodgers seems to be hitting on
Yeah.
these kind of guys. I'm inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt. And it's not like they were the only ones who liked Emil Morales. A
Yeah.
lot of other people who liked him, especially offensively. Defensively, I think he'll go out and develop as a shortstop initially. Uh, Not saying there's no chance he can do it, but I would be surprised if he's able to stick there. I think he's made strides defensively, but I just think that physically, the way he's built, um, and just the way he kind of moves around it. Shortstop probably fits better at third base, but you put him at third base. I think the offensive traits are there to project well at that position too. So I think he's somebody just kind of like Vargas who should go to the DSL and immediately. I expect him to put up some of the better numbers in that league right away.
The other guy, the only other guy, at least that I could find that kind of signed for, I would say, notable money seems to be Rafi Pigero. Um, him, is there, whether it's him or somebody else, is there anybody else in this class that caught your attention, caught your eye?
Yeah, it was definitely like it was an unusual class for the Dodgers because typically they're
Yeah.
very, very aggressive internationally. And I'm not saying they weren't this year, but um, there definitely seems like there's money unspent still.
Oh, there's a Roki Sasaki question coming for you, Ben. That's next
Yeah.
on my bingo card here.
So I think like, in part of it is that I think that their plan A was to sign Morales and Paulino Santana,
Okay.
an outfielder from the Dominican Republic, who ended up signing with the Rangers instead. I don't know the whole backstory there, but he ended up signing for more money with Texas. He's one of the better prospects this year. He's already, pretty highly ranked in the Rangers farm system. I mean, they don't have the same depth as the Dodgers, but I think that was kind of the plan A, and they didn't end up signing him. But yeah, it is definitely conspicuous that they seem to have a lot of money still available to spend from now until December 15th.
I mean, so you just presented what I think is probably the best counter to the Roki Sasaki theory that has absolutely no proof other than, normally the Dodgers get multiple of the top 25 to 30 prospects. And normally they've got about 80 to 100% of their budget seemingly spent on day one of the signing period. And yet here we are, and they only have one top prospect. Like I said, I could only find one other bonus number when I first started looking up the numbers. That was Paguero's. Um, and yet, to your point, maybe they just had another top guy and they didn't get him. And that's actually the real reason why they've got a couple $1,000,000. Maybe it's not because they're trying to save to make a goodwill gesture to Roki Sasaki if he does come over early, which would likely be in this signing period. Like if I had to pin you down on how you make sense of what is a weird international free agency period for the Dodgers so far, what would be your best guess?
Um, I mean, it could be Sasaki. It's his situation right now. It seems pretty murky. Like there's not a
Yeah,
lot of transparency coming out right now about it. And I don't think Paulino, like, it wasn't like they thought they were going to sign Paulino Santana for like $2 or $3 million. It was going to be for, less than what the Rangers ended
got it.
up giving him. So, and this, all kind of happened, a while back too. So, it could be for Sasaki, and it's, sometimes there's players who come out, like, Cuban players who come later on who end up getting big money. So that's a possibility. But, like, who's the last big Cuban player that the Dodgers have signed? Doesn't seem like they've really been super active in that
Yeah.
market in not like in recent years. Obviously, like before
Yeah.
is a different
Yeah.
story.
They
But
were about as active as you could possibly be.
yeah, but since then,
Yeah.
not so much. So that would be a surprise to me. There's sometimes the players in Taiwan
I was gonna say
graduate
they
high.
got the Korean teenager Jong at the end of kind of midway through the signing period last year.
Right. So that, like, players there, players in Taiwan, I mean, they're really at a disadvantage with the way the whole international system works, where these players are, in Dominican Republic and Venezuela are agreeing to sign when they're like 13, 14, all that. But those players, like, they graduate high school and then, as it gets closer to that time, then they actually sign. So it could be there's something there. But yeah, it definitely, they're not the only team that still has money to spend. I think the bonus pools have also just risen to a level where, like, a lot of teams, there's only so many players who really stand out
Yeah,
at
fair.
this age, like worth giving a lot of money to. So I think there's still a lot of teams who still have money available in their pools to sign players, and the Dodgers are not the only one. But yeah, like I don't think I don't think it's wrong to note that they have more money than you would typically expect for them to have at this point.
Yeah, it's fair. It's interesting, and I mean, and this is where I start to get into territory that I'm not 100%, but there are new rules as well, right? On the number of guys that you can have on your roster that are playing abroad, or isn't that a new kind of? There's like a list of some sort that teams have to have, and that number shrunk. Is this making any sense?
Yeah, well, yeah, there's limits on how many players you can have in your minor league system on your domestic roster, which obviously has an impact on the players you have in the Dominican Summer League too, where like you want to keep bringing players over from the
Yeah,
DSL over to Arizona, but then you have to cut players, or you can keep them in the DSL longer, but then you sign fewer players. So
right.
like the teams really hate this, all the roster restrictions that they're under now, because some of them are like, well, we want to keep, we just signed this guy, say in 2023. He's still raw. He has tools, he has athleticism, he has traits we like he's still 17, 18 years old, but this guy who might have been a 2-year DSL guy, like a Starling Marte was, who's just more of a raw
Yeah,
athlete waiting for things to click. Now we have to release these guys and cut them way sooner than we'd
yeah,
really like to, because we have just roster limitations. So it's unfortunate that those are, um, decisions being made obviously at the MLB level for, non on field
yeah.
reasons are kind of hampering teams in this way in terms of having to cycle through players a lot faster than they'd like to.
Yeah, I was looking at past classes and it was 2022. I think the Dodgers had 30 guys signed on day 1 and this year it's 19 and again, without knowing
Yeah.
all the info, I'm thinking, well, if they're limited on how many of these guys they think they'll be able to keep in the organization 2 years from now, then you're probably not signing, you're probably having to narrow down the 19 guys versus, throwing bonuses at an extra 10 to 12.
Totally, and some of these teams have one DSL team. I mean, most of them have two, but like some of them are trying to do it with one DSL team, and it's like
Jeez.
you really have way fewer opportunities to hit on guys. I mean, especially with pitching too. I mean, you're signing guys at 16, 17, 18 years old.
Yeah.
It's not like an exercise involving a ton of precision. Like you just need volume
Yeah.
and see which of these guys takes the next step once they get into your academy.
Yeah. Well, and that I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about how if you look at like the top international free agent signings the Dodgers have made in the last 5 years, there's a lot of disappointing names on there. Like the guys that were, Diego Cartaya being successful was sort of, I won't say an anomaly, but there's a lot of guys that were the top guy the Dodgers signed who didn't pan out. But then you scroll down the list and you're like, oh, this guy, wasn't the top name on the list, and yet 2 years later he's a top 15 prospect in the organization. And the guy who was the number one, I'm thinking of, was it Jesus Galiz was like a catcher, I believe, that was super highly regarded when the Dodgers
Mhm.
signed him. And, he didn't pan out, but then we're talking about Lorenzo here in his place. So it's just that having to cast a wide net and finding sort of hidden gems feels like it's maybe something that's being lost in the meantime.
Yeah, I mean, it's, especially for like I don't even want to call a guy who, signs at like 17 or 18 like a late bloomer. Like
Yeah.
the whole language sounds ridiculous to use that sort of terminology, but now it's like, we get to, December right before January 15th, and if a guy doesn't have a deal to sign, it's like he's like a leftover player. Or if he pops,
Yeah.
a few months before January 15th, oh, he's like a late bloomer. It's like I get it within context of how, scouts are viewing players down there, but just take a zoom out a little bit. It's like, no, that's basically the same age as a high school,
Yeah.
kid going into his, junior year or something like that. So,
Crazy.
yeah.
It's crazy. Well, hey Ben, you've been super gracious with your time. I appreciate that. Anything to plug? Obviously, Baseball America subscriptions there, but anything in particular you want to point people to?
Yeah, no, like you said, we have our top 30 Dodgers prospects and our top 30 prospects for all 30 teams up right now at baseballamerica.com, our top 100 too. So we're always trying to keep those updated and um, throughout the season. So when trade deadline gets here, and even before then, pretty much every month we update our top 100, update our top 30 prospects, trying to make sure, like we talk about, these guys can change a lot in a couple months.
Yeah.
So we're always trying to stay on top of things, give everybody as much new information on these players as we can. So I always appreciate everybody subscribing to BA.
I love it. I love it. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, Ben. Again, we appreciate the time. And folks joining us, thank you. This is Dodger Heads presented by DodgerBlue.com. You can subscribe, ring the notification bell below. Find us on Apple, Spotify, Google. If you are a podcast person, just search for Dodger Heads. Enjoy the rest of your day, folks. As always, go Dodgers.